Welcome back. In this part of the series we are going to be actually registering our user. In this case previous to this we have gone ahead and validated our fields, checked for required fields, checked a few specifics, and now we're at this stage. Now in the last part I created this condition here. Just a quick note to point out, it's actually wrong. Here we've got if the post data is empty, and the errors are empty, then register the user. This here needs to be false. That was just a mistake on my part. So if the post data is full, if it has data and the errors are empty, then we can go ahead and actually register the user. So what do we want to do? Well, we need to construct some kind of model that we need to pass through to a function. And that function is going to be within users.php. We're going to create a function called register user, and we'll also need general.php open because we're going to be creating a function in there that sanitizes data within an array. Now it all sounds very complicated, but as I walk you through this, it shouldn't actually be that hard. So what do I mean by build up a model of data? Well, I'm going to create an array, and this is going to hold all of the user data and which fields that this needs to be placed into. So I'm going to create a variable called register data. I'm going to assign an array to this, and I'm going to just pull this down a bit. I'm going to be creating an associative array, so the label will be some text, and the result will be, the value will be, not row, $_post, it will be some value that we get from our post data. So for example, the first one will be username, and we'll call this username. So here print our register data will give us an idea of what our array here looks like. I'm going to need to go ahead and just as a side note quickly, you'll see here we've got some white space, and if I go ahead and inspect that, you can see that we've got our output errors function is outputting an unordered list with nothing between this first li. The reason being is that we've got an if statement saying if the post data doesn't equal false, i.e. has some data being posted, and the errors are empty, then we can go ahead and register the user. Otherwise, output the errors. Now what we actually need to do is we need to say else if empty errors equals false. So the errors array is not empty. Okay, and what that's going to do is it's going to first of all get rid of the white space, and second of all it's basically just because we need that extra check in there just to make sure that the errors array isn't empty. Anyway, let's continue. So I'm going to print our register data. So let's go ahead and just type in some registration data. I'm just making sure everything matches up. Again, it's a boring case of entering any kind of data really. Okay, so here you can see we've got array username equals AlexAA, which I just typed into here. So we've got this array now that contains the field name that we want to post to in the database and the value that we want to post to, and we can match this up a bit later. So let's go ahead and get rid of that print r. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and stick a comma in here and just replicate this for all of the fields that I want to actually insert. Now remember, we don't need to include password again in here because we are not pasting the password that the user repeated, because it will be the same as the first one. So we want username, password, first name, last name and email. Now the last name may not have been submitted by the user, but that's fine. Let's go ahead and just substitute these. So password, first name, and as I said, the last name, even though it may be blank, but that's fine, so it doesn't matter if it's not required. And then lastly, the email address. So let's just go ahead and tidy this up. I'll just tab these along a bit so it's a bit easier on the eye. So we have now all of these values in our array. and we want to go ahead and pass these to the register user function, which we haven't created yet but will do in due course. So we want to pass this data to register data. We want to pass this data to the register user function, and then after here we want to redirect, which we'll deal with later, and then exit just in case, well, there's no real reason, it's just in case that a user's browser for some reason doesn't interpret redirect properly. Okay, we want to kill the script. Okay, so what do we want to do? Well, we need to go now and create the register user function. So over to users.php, we create a function called register_user, and we know that this takes one parameter, and that's the register data. Now inside of here I'm going to go ahead and print our register data, and I'm actually going to go ahead and fill this form out properly now, so we can actually start to refresh and deal with some real data, you know, assuming a user would go ahead and enter this correctly. So username is Billy, password is, I'm just going to enter password again, first name Billy, last name Garrett, and email billy@phpacademy.org. So register, there's the data that's being returned from the register user function. Now let's look at this data. What do we actually need to do? Well, the first thing that we need to do is protect against, or start to protect against SQL injection by sanitizing this. Now if you remember, inside of general.php we have a sanitize function. Unfortunately we could use this on our array, but we'd have to loop through each element of the array and apply this and then re-put it back into the array. Instead we can use something called array walk, and what this will do is it will walk through essentially, or go through every element of the array and apply something to it and return that data if required. So we're going to be creating a new function here in just a moment. So it sounds confusing, but it's not at all. Okay, so the second thing we want to do is we want to encrypt this password. We're going to use the MD5 hash on it. Again, not entirely secure, but we'll look at, you know, sorting that out later on in another video and enforcing more security on our site. So let's go ahead and first of all encrypt this password with MD5. So within our register user function, what do we want to do? Well, we essentially just want to reassign a value to this element of the array. So we're going to say register_data, and we're going to access password is equal to register_data password. We want to wrap this, the reassignment value, within MD5. Now what's going to happen is when we refresh, remember if you're following along, don't hit enter here, just actually refresh so you confirm your form resubmission. You'll see now that the password has been converted to MD5. Perfect. So we now have data as we'd want to place it in. Okay, now let's focus on walking through this array and actually sanitizing each element of the array without having to loop through and do anything too complicated. So I'm going to use array walk, and I'm going to into this I'm going to supply the register data, which is an array. Now within single quotes I want to specify the function that walks through this array. Now we haven't created this yet, so we're going to have to create another function, but essentially this function is just going to take in a value, do something to it, and return it back and place it within the array. So I'm going to call this array sanitize. So we're walking through the array with array sanitize. Let's create array sanitize quickly. It's relatively straightforward, few lines. Array sanitize. Now we're going to take a parameter in here, but it's slightly different, and because we want to return this value, we're going to use the AND symbol and then the variable name. And in here we're going to assign item, which we've passed in here, to MySQL real escape string, and then obviously the item. So we're passing the item in, we're reassigning the item, and then we are applying this to the values within register data. So every element in register data now gets this MySQL real escape string applied to it. So let's go ahead and check out the results. So it won't look much different at all. But if, for example, we were to, I won't demonstrate because I'm going to have to fill the form out again, pass any illegal characters in, they would be escaped, ready to be placed into a query. So now we actually need to construct our registration query. So I'm going to go ahead and get print R. We're not going to need that anymore. I'm going to create two variables. One's going to be called fields and one's going to be called data. And we're going to make use of the implode function to essentially just group all these together. Like we did here for the fields that we placed within the users table, we're going to do exactly the same thing. So here I'm going to implode, let me just get rid of that. I'm going to implode by something, and I'm going to, what do I want to implode? We'll register data. And I'm going to concatenate on a backtick, so not a single quotation mark, a backtick, and I'm going to do that for either side. And then within here I've got a backtick, comma, and then a backtick. So the output we're going to get from this now is, I'll say echo fields is a string. Fields will now be a string, and that will look much like this. We've got Billy in single quotes, a password in single quotes. Sorry, I've done it the completely wrong way round. This here will be data. So echo data. Because remember, data when we're inserting a query goes within backtick. So fields now equals nothing. So this is our data. So the username is Billy, the password's MD5, first name, last name, email, blah blah blah. Now we want to do the fields, so let's get rid of this echo here. Fields equals, again, implode. We want to implode by something. We want to implode registered data, but because we've passed through an associative array, the element names are the field that we want to give. So we again need to place, I'm going to place single quotes, which means I have to escape that character. I'm going to place a single quote here, escape that, and I'm going to place a single quote here with a comma, and then just one single quote. So you'll see how this looks on the output, and this escaping will make a lot more sense. But now if I was to go ahead and echo fields, in actual fact we're not echoing the fields that we want to write to, and eventually our query is going to look something like this. So insert into users, and then in here will be the field names. So the field names will look like username, username, password, blah blah blah, and then it will be values, and then values will go like this with single quotes, Alex, MD5 hash. Okay, so that's what it needs to look like. So here we don't need oh, I've done it the wrong way around again. Okay, so let's just change this around. So fields and data. Now remember, our fields are surrounded by backticks. Our data is surrounded by single quotes. So echoing out the data here, the fields here, currently looks like this, single quotes. What we want to do is, instead of outputting the data, output the actual field names. So how do we go about this? Well, we use the array keys just around this register data here. And what that's going to do is it's going to give us the keys of the array that we passed through, and these relate to these here. So that was a bit of a faff. We've got fields that are surrounded by single backticks, which are the field names, and the data, which is surrounded by single quotes, which is the data we're actually inserting. So that's how we end up with it, and that's definitely correct. So now what we're going to do is actually going to query the database and actually create this user. So I'm going to use the MySQL query function, and within here is going to go the query. So we are going to leave it there because we've gone over a bit of time. In the next part we're going to actually look at inserting the data and actually registering this user, and then essentially we're going to have a system set up where we can register, log in, log out, another user can register, someone else can register somewhere else, and it's going to be working. So in the next part we'll do that.